Football is a violent sport, and it has been for decades. But the violence of the sport really is what draws the fans into the sport. Now, big hits, helmets flying off, trash talking all come along with the great sport of football. But just to show you how violent the sport really is, let's watch a short YouTube video.
Oh, what a hit. Look out. Brad Smith. My goodness. See, he's defenseless. No way he can protect himself. And he can. Oh, Jones. The pick happens. Pulls it down to run and gets leveled. Designed quarterback sweep. Face mask, man!
I think that video really does depict how violent the NFL really is. But after watching all those brutal hits, isn't there some concern for the health and safety of these players? Well, football players, coaches, referees, and families are all relevant when it comes to this complex problem. As a player, fears of receiving one of those devastating blows are at the forefront of your mind. As a coach, you do not want to see one of your players that you have coached and trained and mentored get blown up. And it can really rattle a coach to a different degree that they've never felt. As a referee, those type of hits are the ones that you're trying to eliminate from the game. You do not want to see those anymore. And as a parent or a relative of a player that receives a vicious hit like this, I mean, it can just send chills down your spine. And this leads me to the question of, will you let your child suit up for a football game? See, well, I grew up playing football since the 3rd grade, and though I have really never underwent a hit like one of those, I have seen plenty of them. And playing on the defensive side of the ball pretty much my whole career, I can say that nothing gets your coach fired up more than making one of those hits. But beyond this, my goal for the presentation is to enlighten you on my complex problem of concussions in the NFL by explaining 1, NFL concussion statistics by year, 2, how the NFL has improved their rules, and 3, new innovative helmet technology to protect the players. Let's get into the first point, NFL concussion statistics by year. Sports Health conducted a study showing NFL concussion statistics in 2 6-year periods. There were a 0.38 documented concussions per NFL game in 2002 to 2007. Now, that 0.38 was 7.6% lower than the 0.42 that we saw in the earlier period of 1996 to 2001. So that's just a bit of evidence showing that the NFL might be making a safer game. In 2002 to 2007, 24.1 of the reported concussions occurred on rushing plays. And now that 24.1% was way lower than what we saw in the 6-year period prior to it. It was 31.3%. Now, something else was, concussions occurring on kickoffs, which have been notoriously violent plays. And really, this led to a rule change when the concussions increased from 15.9 to 20.6. And we'll get into the rule change a little bit later, but first let's look at some charts showing these statistics. Now, first off, Mtbi, mild traumatic brain injury, that's essentially a concussion. And we can see they're broken up into 2 different years in the columns here. So number of Mtbi in 1996 to 2001 was 887. And now moving on to 2002 to 2007, we saw 854, which was a 3.7% drop over those years. So, I mean, we can say that the NFL is making efforts and successfully doing it to make the game safe. And really, this chart's just interesting to see how the game has changed and, how concussions are happening over years. And we can just see, these were the type of helmets they were using in the 1996 to 2001 era, and these were the ones that they're using in more recent. So let's look at another chart, more recent data here, 2015 to 2020, and we can see, the totals were going down until 2017, and that was the year, as said prior, was the year for a lot of concussions on kickoffs. And so in 2018, they implemented a rule that we'll get into later. But as we can see, this was high, and then they dropped off from there. And these statistics can be skewed due to referees playing their part in making the game safer for players and protecting them from concussions. Which leads me into my second point, some of the rules that the NFL has put into play to make the game safer. So an old rule over a decade ago, they made a rule change which eliminated the blindside blocks and the helmet. So really, they did not want to see any football player getting hit in the head or using their head to make a hit. And so more recent, 2018, it is a foul if a player lowers his head to initiate contact and make helmet-to-helmet contact. So, they took it even farther to say no one can use their head for a hit. It's all body. You gotta go after them. And then in 2018, they also put in the kickoff rule that I've been talking about. And this rule, the cool thing about it was when they put it into play, they saw a 35% decrease in concussions on kickoff plays, which, that's why you're putting these rules into play. So you can see a drop in concussions. And so, if none of these rules are followed, the NFL is not shy on giving out ejections or even fines. They'll do it. Just a side note, CTE is a common brain injury that football players can undergo, and it's really terrible. But it was first described in 1928 when Dr. Harrison Martland described a group of boxers of having punch drunk syndrome. That's not really something that I would want to be described as, punch drunk. It's just not great. But this CTE can cause memory loss and even suicidal behavior. And one big story of it was the Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker Mike Webster in 2005 when he drew attention to that. But branching off of this, that story really did blow up enough to them make a movie about it called Concussion. It came out in 2015. Great movie starring Will Smith. And it tells the story, of the discovering of CTE and, the story of Mike Webster and how he underwent it. Highly recommend it if you haven't watched it and if you're a sports fan. Moving on to my third and final point is Visus. It's a company that has really innovated the technology in the helmet for football helmets, and mainly because of, as we can see, it absorbs impact. It takes away impact that would go to your head, but now the shell and the inner lining will flex depending on the hit. And they've done a really good job at putting NFL players in these helmets to market them. As you can see, Patrick Mahomes, one of the best football players at the moment. And these helmets can really change the game because making helmets that will reduce the risk of concussion is a big step in making the game safer. Concussions have stayed prevalent in the NFL for generations, and with more time and more studies on the issue, there has been more done to prevent them. But throughout rule changes and, revolutionary technology in helmets, the sport has made their efforts to make the game safer. And though this game of football may be super fun and entertaining, the players are still putting their health and safety at risk every time they step on the field. But most people do have their own opinion on how this game should be played and how the officials should make the rules. But, really, who knows what the future holds for the NFL in terms of safety and rules. Here's my works cited. Thank you so much, guys.